order the meeting, the Raymore Charter Review Commission meeting for April 18, 2017, and ask for a confirmation of quorum.
Commissioners Wilson,
Present.
Ackland,
Present.
Burke,
Present.
Castleman,
Present.
Wiggins,
Present.
Hubach,
Present.
Stidham,
Present.
Daring, Moorhead.
Present. Please stand for the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to approval of minutes, I'm open for a motion to dispose.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to dispose of the March 21st minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. We have no unfinished business. Yes, Ms. Hubach?
I didn't get in there on 7.2 on judges, where it says it's appointed by the mayor. That's not true. As you know, we always have in number A, because it's not with the advice and consent of the city council. We do the interviewing, we do the voting, we do it all. On section 2 on judges, where it says it should be appointed by the mayor with the consent and advice and consent.
Ms. Hubach, was that a part of our minutes?
I'm trying to find out, did we discuss that or not?
We did.
We discussed our municipal court. I'm not sure,
Because,
were you concerned, was there a concern about an error with the minutes?
well, I don't know.
It says other.
I just have it circled in red to make sure that I brought it up, and I don't
What
know.
page is she on?
Page 17.
Like in the actual
No, no,
charter.
no,
She's
no,
not-
what is she on?
She's on the charter.
on the chart.
Oh, it's
Not-
not in the minutes, okay. Then just procedurally, I'm closing the approval of the minutes section, moving to unfinished business, and I'll recognize this as unfinished business
Fine.
for the question. Okay, so you're saying under Article 7,
7-2A.
Article 7,
2A.
Section 7.2 judges, where it
Okay.
says they shall be appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of 3/4 of the entire council. So the entire council is actually the one we interview, we determine, we vote, we do it all. The only thing that the mayor does on that, we use him as the moderator to ask the question. We've even set up what the questions are to be. So, actually, when we're eliminating that being appointed by the mayor, we need to eliminate it because he's actually, all of them, yes, we have the judges and the prosecuting attorney, all of them. We, as a council,
Okay.
we determined it.
Okay, Mr. Wiggins.
I have in my notes here that like most of these sections we actually didn't discuss because Mr. Zerg read to us that, you know, section or standard, whatever, 130.030 covered this whole section, and so we never even really discussed the section at all because there's something higher than our charter that dictates the process of appointment and term.
I know we had a brief open remark around Section A about the 2-year term, whether to go longer or shorter.
Sure.
It was a brief discussion. Ms. Hubach, I will say procedurally, referring to appointment, at some point, we put out a request for judges to submit an application. Technically, the mayor is our spokesperson, so through staff, it could be argued that the mayor asking the staff to put out a request is the same thing as the exercise of the appointment
But he
for
had no
us
vote.
to then choose between them.
He has no vote, and when we had that time that we had, was it like 15 or 16 people, we in the council determined which ones we wanted, 5 we wanted to interview. The mayor had nothing to do with any of that.
But remember, Ms. Hubach, we did discuss what the meaning of advice and consent was, and that's the voting process. An appointment is not a vote. So he appointed to bring candidates to the table, and then the advice and consent. No different than you see in Congress when a nominee is brought forward. The president does not sit in the chambers as the Senate interviews and then votes on like a Supreme Court justice. In this particular instance, your issue about the mayor and the role is consistent with this language.
I just don't think should be the appointed should be in there, because he is not appointed by the mayor in any way, shape, or form.
I tell you what, we did have a little bit of a discussion on this, but I tell you what we'll do. When we get to the end, we have the ability to go back if we have missed something, and Ms. Hubach, that would be an acceptable time to re-raise that issue.
That would be acceptable
All
with me.
right, thank you. Mr. Stidham.
Mike, I have a suggestion too, as we have, since we determined this, either remove the word entire, or we consider the mayor part of the council that's taken a vote there. Because the entire council, as we define it now, includes the mayor.
I tell you what, very rarely will I do this, but for the sake of, this was not actually listed as a formal item under unfinished business. So I entertained Mrs. Hubach's question, but I'm gonna move past this so we can move on to section 8, and that can be raised also at the end, and we revisit that. My fear, Mr. Stidham, is we could go very long on that substantive topic. So,
How, it's already been defined, it's already been
well,
decided.
we've had instances where the mayor did not participate in votes. We have to go back and evaluate the times we have the mayor participating and the mayor not.
Well, I don't have issue whether he participates or not. Mine was more on the language, that we either need to take the word entire out, or we need to submit to the fact that he will be a part of that, as we find entire council back in our.
So
first-
you're not trying to affect the role of the appointment of the
No,
vice
I'm just
consent,
mentioning the
just
language.
the language. Mr.
And unless
Zert, you
it's
have
statutory.
since we have entire council and we did do some definitional stuff in the beginning, Mr. Stidham helped me out because I think I'm subtly in line with you. Use of the phrase entire council is incorporating the mayor as a vote or not?
That is not. The definition of the entire council is 8 members, the 8 council members, not the mayor.
Which means,
In other words, not the council present.
right, so it's not a quorum of those present at a meeting, it has to be the entirety, a quorum of the entire council. Yes, you're absolutely correct, we did have that discussion at length. When we are talking in terms of approval by the council, the approval by the council would be, we have 8 members of the council. If there are only 6 that show up that night, we'd have a majority of them voting by 4 in order to approve that particular action. When the reference is in there that talks about the entire council, that references into a full 8 members of the council, which means you need to have 5 individuals approving it, even if there were only 6 people present.
But in this case, it talks about 3/4.
Right.
So what it's saying is, it takes 6 council member votes, no matter how many are present, it takes 6 council member votes to appoint a judge.
For clarification, because I think I'm having the same issue here, what was the term of art we used in the very beginning where we incorporated the mayor into the vote?
I thought it was either the council, and if the mayor was included, it was the entire council.
We're gonna see that language again in Article 8, in the editor's.
Yes, I do too. I tell you what, I'm gonna ask,
Unless you change it.
I'm gonna take a
Right
little,
here.
I'm gonna
Entire
take,
city council is 8 plus the mayor.
so we don't sit here in silence, and I wanna allow staff.
When we
Oh,
actually-
you have an answer?
Whenever an action, this is the change that is proposed.
Yes.
Whenever an action under this charter requires the vote of the entire council, this shall mean a vote of at least 5 of the 8 council members. As not, doesn't mention the mayor at all. In the event of 4-4 tie of the 8 council members, the mayor may vote to break the tie in accordance with section 4.4 of this charter. That's where the mayor gets mentioned. But in the case of what's being discussed here, what they are saying is the entire council means the 8 council members, not the mayor.
Mr. Stidham, are you comfortable with that?
Well, my notes are contradictory of that, but yeah, if
What-
that's the way
what's
it's.
that?
On
What
the
section?
first page.
Well,
this.
Article 5, Section 5.1 again, when we were talking about appointment term, the entire entire city council is 8 plus the mayor. On my notes.
I think the issue, my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off by any means, that the first sections of this highlighted page, this is the definitions section, and so it says
1.2.
whenever, basically it's saying forevermore mentioned in the charter, this is how it should be defined. No matter what is printed in the charter, this takes precedence. So section 5, we kind of would have ignored it because we established in 1.2 the changes. Or am I like way off base? Because in the definition section at the front, doesn't that say
I agree.
anywhere else you see this,
Yes.
this is how it is? So
Well,
we would have skipped
I'm
it.
willing to slow down and get this addressed, especially because I believe in Article 8, we are going to come up
with it
with another
again,
vote
yeah.
issue. And I want to make sure we're consistent, we're
Sure.
all defining things. Because the problem with debate is sometimes you remember the debate and forget the result. And so,
Well, again, I don't have issue with the issue, it was just the language.
fair enough. I tell you what, let's go ahead and proceed, and if we run across this, staff will have a chance to kind of, be prepared and not be caught. Okay, moving on to section 8 on boards, commissions, and committees. There's an editor's note in the beginning. The editor's note obviously offers some definitional assistance. Before we get into discussion on this, I'll ask for a staff report. If not, we can get into discussion.
Yeah, we're on section 8, sir?
Yes, Article 8.
Article 8, we didn't include staff report in this, at the direction of the chair.
Absolutely, fair enough. Moving on to the editor's notes, there is some discussion specifically about the Park and Rec Board. Anybody have any thoughts or concerns regarding that?
I have a question on 8.1, and not the editor's note, but on 8.1.
Let's stay on just the editor's note, though. Because we have the recognition of Resolution 99-4. Are we comfortable, since it references the composition of 9 directors, and that they will attempt to have equal representation spread out throughout the wards? Ms. Schubach, I think didn't you help create the park board?
Yeah, one of the things, I've been reading other charters from other cities as well as our charters. And one of the things that I noticed, we're governed by the state statutes on a lot of things. And on the others, what they are doing is they are making specific references to Park Board in their charter. They are spelling out in detail about how the charter and that, so that a memorandum of understanding is not necessary. Because then I was wondering if we should consider something along those lines. We just barely mentioned boards and commissions and all. And I'm just thinking about it, would we be better served by having the Park Board and spell it out in detail what we want from the Park Board, rather than do this memorandum of understanding? That bothers me, to me, it's not necessary for one department to have a memorandum of understanding with another department. Spell it out in the charter, and so we know exactly where we are. And so we know what the mayor is supposed to do, we know what the city manager is supposed to do, and the relationship between the city manager and the director of Parks and Recreation.
Ms. Schubach, I think you bring up a very good topic. I'm going to give staff a moment to collect themselves. Mr. Fearborn, we have several boards and commissions, but I believe there is a kind of a unique structure with the Park Board with this memorandum of understanding. Could you give us an idea of kind of why that's done and why the park board may be structured differently.
I wouldn't say, the park board is structured according to what is outlined within state statute, because state statute guides how park boards are structured. But the nature of the park board's, ability to act within the city is governed by a memorandum of understanding that the park board came to with the city council, several years ago, after, basically a series of miscommunications between the two on what the authority of the park board actually was. The beginning of the memorandum of understanding that exists right now essentially says that the park board is responsible for the care and maintenance of all the park properties and for the budget of the park board, and that they have exclusive control over those items. It then goes on in the next sentence to say, for purposes of this memorandum of understanding, here is the definition of exclusive control, which says the park board shall be an advisory group to the city council relative to their budget. So it's a little, you gotta kind of cascade down to get to the fact that the council ultimately votes on the park board's budget and their expenditures because of that next sentence that defines what exclusive control actually means.
Okay.
Now, I've served on the park board, and the park board budget is separate from the city budget, right?
That's correct.
That still stands.
The MOU also addresses the personnel matters as between the two entities, personnel employees of the city versus those that are under the control of park board, and how that distinction is made between the two.
And in essence, all of the employees of the Parks and Recreation Department are employees of the city and thus subject to the city manager, with the exception of the Parks and Recreation Director, who is jointly supervised by the park board and the city manager.
Okay, Ms. Schubach, getting to your point, I want to be careful here because, and I'm throwing this open-ended out to everybody. I'm hearing that we have an entity that it's technically its own political subdivision based on state statute, or at least is created by state statute. So there is a certain degree of autonomy there. In fact, I believe it does not have its own tax. So it collects money independent that is not city general funds. At the same time, though, what we're looking at here are the city's ability to create boards, commissions, and committees. And while the city shall have a Parks and Recreation Board, I'm concerned how much we get into the MOU, because the MOU is not at the charter level. That's actually a lower independent act by the board, and that's something the park board can choose just not to participate in. But I'm not sure it can be addressed at the charter level. What are anybody's thoughts on that? I'm not trying to steal away your argument, Ms. Schubach. It's an interesting substantive discussion, but I'm not sure actually it's within our direct jurisdiction.
Well, because there's just a budget involved and then there's a levy involved, I think it should be addressed in here, because like I said, there is. And the last couple of times I remember that when we changed the levy, we didn't really get, park board approval, did we? To
Yes.
change it? Cause we could increase it, cause I had asked to have it increased up to the full 2 mil, from what, 1 and something mil up to 2 mil, and, it wasn't done, but then we could have done it based on, if we'd had something in here.
The issue I'm seeing though is when you look at, for example, the levy, you're dealing with a tax assessment that is based on state statute. and it is controlled independent of the city, so it's not governed under Article 8, which is this board.
Okay.
Now, it may be an activity of the park board, but that is not related to our ability to create a park board. It's kind of I think what you're concerned about may be a very serious question, but it's further down the stream than actually what we're doing.
Well, I was thinking also in terms when you talked about the cemetery, you're gonna be talking about different funds, maybe a budget for that too. You may not have a levy, and again, what about the Arts Commission? You may have a levy on that too in some ways. So I'm trying to determine out what we're going to do. Are we going to make the park board unique, or is it going to be a leader in what we do for the rest of the group?
Well, but the park board is already unique because state statute already makes it unique.
That's right.
And that's outside of our charter. So really, anything state statute wise, we have no authority to change. And like I said, I understand what you're getting at, but the decision to do an MOU really is candidly the Parks Board's own initiative and the choice of the city manager to approach the council to encourage us to do that. But I don't think that has anything to do with
You don't think that is, okay.
this section of it. I think it's a very important city issue and parks issue, but I don't think we can say, you guys can't do MOUs, because that's like saying, Miss Warner, you can only use blue pens, blue ink, not black. I mean, that's micromanaging a process away from what our jurisdiction here at this level.
Well, I didn't have any problems with anything on Article 8, except we're going to be creating more park boards, not park board, but more boards. And I just wondered if we were prepared for, there's the Arts Commission, there'll be the Cemetery Commission, or there will be several things. And it's, if you read on chapter 89 of part of planning and zoning, they're allowed to have a budget and hire their own people. So are we covered in all of this?
Well, I would draw your attention, we're getting away from the editor's note, but if we're getting into Article 1, if you look at the third paragraph, the second, third, and fourth paragraph specifically denote the state statute where we are to carry out in the spirit and intent of. So I think it's kind of like what we've done with our municipal courts. We've recognized the courts have a state statute that we must follow, that we will not put in our charter. So I believe that those three types of boards, the Board of Adjustment, Planning and Zoning Commission, and Park Boards, are covered under here.
Okay, one thing that's not mentioned there is ad hoc committees.
Well, we have the section under the mayor's section where we are not to allow standing or ad hoc committees.
I brought that in on the procedural rules of the council. I brought that in so that we could go over, because it spells out in detail that we will not have any special.
Well, and
board.
that's a different section, and that's outside of what we're reviewing here. Backing up under the editor's note, Resolution 99-04 talked about composition of the park board. We have 9 members. Mr. Zer, we only have 8 members on planning and zoning, correct? 2 per ward?
Yes. at
Do
this
we have an
particular time.
at-large in planning and zoning?
You have the option in planning and zoning for both the mayor as well as a council member to serve on that
So
position.
the
But
mayor,
not an at-large citizen. Do we have any concern that we allow for the strange construct of a at-large? Or are we comfortable with that?
when I looked at the other cities, what they had with the park board, they had a liaison between the city council and the park. And I don't know whether we would want to do something like that, and if we did it, started for them, would we want it for other commissions? And this is the time to think about it, and I just don't know which way we need to go.
Respectfully, that's one component. The first component was just the at-large member themselves. Does anybody like the idea of maintaining that? We are giving, in essence, a board a artificial disadvantage or advantage, disadvantage or advantage, depending how you wanna look at it, why the need for an at-large member? Was it to go to 9 so we had an automatic tiebreaker?
I don't know.
It does automatically tie. I mean, you look at what we deal with the council of 8, we have to have the mayor breaking ties and stuff like that. Planning and zoning, typically the mayor has served as a member on planning and zoning as a voting member, which offers us a 9th. So are you guys comfortable with staying at 9?
I guess a question, just for my lack of knowledge, I mean, do they have similar rules in place that if, let's say hypothetically, they're voting on a new park, and we literally could have it in any ward possible, you know, if you had an at-large that was in Ward 1, is 3 of 9 votes enough to say, okay, yeah, Ward 1 gets it? I mean, is it really that much of an advantage? Because if they have to be 5 of 9 or whatever, then is it really that much of an advantage? Because it's not like you got 5 of 9 people are from one ward. You know, an at-large, I mean, if it's not that much to be able to automatically push everything directly to your ward, then
I think it's
Statistically, no. Mr. Burke?
I only think it's an advantage if you have a charismatic extra member of that ward that can sway people's opinions. And that's can be in any situation. That one person could be the one of 2,
yeah.
and they could still have, and I've kind of felt that was the way sometimes in planning and zoning when I was on, when the mayor would speak to something, sometimes that had a lot of sway as far as to get the group to think a certain way. The mayor, I felt, had a lot of influence sometimes, but that's part of leadership, I think.
Well, if I remember correctly, one of the reasons why the mayor is in there, the mayor doesn't have a vote when it comes to subdivisions or anything like that, just the council. So the only time the mayor can really make himself known is by being on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Right.
The city council has the right to vote on subdivisions, so there's no need for the city council to have representatives on there. But this is the only time the mayor can influence what's going on in planning and zoning, because he makes up has the right to vote. So I think that's important, more important that he's on there than a city council member.
Staying back to the original point though, do we feel the issue of the at-large citizen member is a concern or not? No? Okay, moving past that. Now, the next issue is the role of the mayor or a council liaison. Do you feel any concerns over that? There have been issues raised in the past.
Is that similar to what he was on the ballot for?
No, the council has, about every other year, there has been a motion made for the council to have a non-voting liaison on the park board. There have been arguments, Ms. Hubach, I know typically has made the argument that allows the council member to have influence at the park meetings and then a vote at a subsequent meeting, which makes them more powerful than non-liaison council members. There's also been the argument that it would allow a council liaison to communicate and answer questions of the park board instead of them voting blindly. Some of that has been because of different varying levels of communication between the two entities.
Just
We
for
have not
just a
had
short
one
minute,
appointed.
Can I ask what that was we voted on for Chris Turnbull on the ballot?
Oh, that was.
Oh, that was the
emergency
emergency
management
Totally
stuff.
different.
I mean, it did,
Well,
But-
then why were we voting on it?
It was
wasn't
a
for us.
county.
It was a
That's
county level
Yes,
emergency
Yes,
management.
political subdivision, the emergency board is a political subdivision. Has nothing to do with the city. He's on another board
It's a-
outside
Then
the
why
city.
are we voting on that?
It's county.
It's
You
something
Because
that
it's
we have to
countywide.
vote on.
You live in the county, it's county.
You're within the emergency.
It's a Cass County level thing.
But as far as the park board, Mr. Stowe,
I think that at least my term on the park board, the director was the liaison to the city administrator. And I think that It's effective. I think that having a city council representative or liaison at those meetings would not, I just don't think it would be fair to the park board. I think they could lean and sway and, you know, there's gotta be some involvement in communication because some of the budget is from the city. And, you know.
I served that role and I thought it was beneficial to be there.
What we ran into is what we did have at one time on the council, excuse me, we had a liaison. And it became a contest between the liaison and the park director as to who was really representing it. Because what we found out then, the council speaks as one voice. And the council gets very, very testy when one council member has more power than another council member. And when you let a council member be a liaison to any other thing, you're giving him or her, more power on that board than what the rest of them could do. And so that is the main reason that we got rid of some of those. The council wants to have power shared equally. They are very, very testy is a nice word, I guess, to use. If I can influence the park board, which by being a liaison, but you can't because you're not on there. The same way with planning and zoning.
You know, I never
We have
never interpreted myself as being a powerful person. I just saw myself as a liaison.
But some people.
Times have changed.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
A little over 2 years ago was the last time we had a vote on this. There was strong momentum on the council to go the opposite way and to put a liaison on there, but it was because there were difficult communication between the park director and city staff. And so there was kind of a desire to bridge that. Before we really could get a strong enough momentum though, there was a change in park director, and we have very good communication right now. So there's not really a reason to put somebody on there. Mr. Burke?
The first time that I was involved with a joint meeting with the Parks Board and the City Council, we were talking about the memorandum of understanding, and I specifically, because I could not understand and I could not read the Park Board very well, I specifically asked the Park Board maybe as much as 3 times, as many as 3 times, is there animosity or is there resentment, is there a problem between the park board and the city council at this time? And I asked it 3 separate times and finally got a specific answer that there was not. But I had to ask because I couldn't really have an understanding of whether that maybe they were resentful of something we were doing to step on their toes. And that was maybe my inexperience at that point. But it was something that I felt strongly that I had to ask it more than once, because it seemed like there was a problem, and it was stated that there was not.
I think perhaps you ought to talk to the park board. And, I mean, if you're gonna want some real guidance and real direction on this, we can sit around here and talk what's best for any committee, or any board or anything else. But, I think if it's that big of a hot point, I'd talk to the park board.
Mr. Councilman?
Yeah.
I think it's largely a matter of personality, because the difficulties I experienced, this is my 10th year on this board. I was on the board in Grandview for 10 years. Grandview, their Parks Commission includes a member of the school board and the Board of Aldermen. Has been for years. And they have an at-large member. My perception of the relationship, at least while I was on the park board before, was a matter, we had, to be honest, some liaisons who didn't want to be there. Simple as that. Who just didn't want to be there. It's like liaison became a bad word. I used the reference that when I was still active in the Air Force, I worked for the British liaison with the Communications Command for the United States. Worked great. We were not competing, it was coordination. And I think it's a matter of approach. John Seamers was the most recent effective liaison when John was first appointed to the council. There's been others who were there who had some input. There was no cross swords or anything, it was just lack of interest, I think, or commitment on one side or the other. But I see value in it, I do.
That was kind of my point. I agree with, I think maybe the value would be that bridging the communication gap. If sometimes the council is unaware of maybe what proceeded at the meetings, maybe because I didn't watch the video, but early on, that video on YouTube is a new phenomenon that hasn't always been afforded. Maybe that because of the videos, the liaison would be there to ask questions, but there could be value in it, just so we don't have misunderstanding.
And not only ask questions, but to answer questions, because there are things new members of the park board who are learning the process. And something may be proposed that would be counterintuitive to the city council because of a procedure or a matter of regulation that the board or individual members doesn't know about. The value to me is coordination.
Well, as a person who was actually put up and nominated to serve as the last liaison, and not chosen, was, one of the things I would point out when we're looking at this section, when I'm looking at it, I'm trying to ask myself, what role do we want the council and staff to play with a board, commission, or committee? The park board is a different creation. In that position, we have an arts commission, planning and zoning, things like that, where we have delegated staff that work with them, and they work with a degree of autonomy, although they have a very limited mission statement. The park board, because they do have some outside statutory authority and money, we have the city manager who is actually in relation with the park board regarding the park director. So the city council actually has, as its lone employee, kind of already a liaison that interacts dramatically with that board. So there is a slight difference there, at least I'm seeing a slight difference. What I've seen is times of, flourish and times of drought, where we've had times like right now, it's not a secret, the park board and the city council are getting along wonderfully. In fact, city council, I think the remark was made publicly, we just gave 10 million reasons to the park board why we're supporting them, quote, the bond money. And we're getting along wonderfully. We have great communication, not just when the park director comes before the council on Monday nights, but we have had instances in the past where things were said where you would kind of watch a park board meeting on YouTube and you'd hear something said, and then you would, the city manager might say something different to us, and then we're going, wait a second, I didn't hear that right. I go to a park board member and say, did that really happen? They go, no, that didn't happen. And everybody got really confused. I don't think, at least this last 7 years, I don't think there's ever been a true clash. I think there's just a weird, like we didn't understand each other. Like there were just.
Well, and then you also have to look at the park director we have now is so great. And
And-
so personable and
Yes.
so willing to go the extra mile to help people.
Well, I don't
As
want
a
to.
member of Sunset Garden Club, he goes the extra mile to help us whenever we need anything, like our plant sale. When we set up for the egg, we gave away 500 trees at the egg,
The Easter.
egg hunt,
Yeah.
So he had everything set up for us, comes back, do you need anything, you got everything you need. I mean, he's got the guys everybody's just like this, he's got everything straightened out.
I think you already have someone to help look after the park board, and that's the city manager. And I think we just ought to leave it as it is. Let the city manager and the park director, if there's any problems, let them work it out. We've got one employee and he's in charge of everything, so let's let him handle it.
Well, and I will say, I don't want to say anything negative about the previous park director specifically. I mean, people may have opinions, I don't wanna turn this into that form. Or the previous city manager, I mean, you know, but it did seem like there was a little bit of a game of telephone being played, and, you know, not the same story got passed back and
And
forth.
that's where the video really helps. I know there was a time where I looked in the minutes of a city council meeting, and I'm like, did I really? And I was quoted as saying something, I'm like, I don't think I said that. I went back and watched the video, and it was exactly word for word what I said. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I intended to say it that way, but that's exactly what I said, and the video is very, very helpful. And so that's also something that is afforded to anyone that wants to go and look and see what they're doing, so it is helping.
I'd like to open this up, because this is really just one section. It's a very short article with a couple of notes.
Well, I move we accept it as presented.
Well, I want to open the question up, because we have created an arts commission in the last few years. That is governed under this. We also have the charter review committee that's technically governed under this, that we're currently in. So I'll open this up. Are there any other boards or commissions that this body feels warrants being included or mentioned?
Good point, yeah.
Being spelled out more specifically.
Yeah, or if you feel that we're missing something.
Now, what is
Mr.
the
Stidham.
what does the art commission do?
Procedurally, she just made a motion,
Yes, you did.
and before we discuss it, I'll second the motion so we can get it out for discussion on the table.
Okay,
Thank you.
we have a motion and a second to just accept this as is. So I will challenge the motion by asking the open-ended question that I asked, and now let's go ahead and have a discussion on that. Do we have anything additional we may want to add, Mr. Burke?
Are there any state statutes in each of these that are spelled out here? There are state statutes that talk about those particular boards, but I would guess, since we haven't had an arts commission, that there probably isn't any language that discusses how they are to run. So therefore, we wouldn't need to show in the charter that we are in alignment with the state statutes if there aren't any that pertain to them.
Mr. Zer, do you believe when we were creating that there was an actual state statute governing arts commission?
I don't believe there was. I think we specifically included the Planning and Zoning and Board of Adjustment because they are required to have references from state statute for their adoption, and for us to adopt the UDO and the zoning code provisions. We have to have a Planning and Zoning Commission, we have to have a Board of Adjustment in order to impose zoning within the city.
Okay. And again, my part of the discussion was just open-ended to be complete in this section. If we feel that it's good, then I have no problem supporting the motion on the table, Mr. Jackson.
I have a question. In adding any future commission or boards that we've not even thought of as we grow, would that require a change to the charter?
No, we have under the 5th paragraph, any other boards, commissions, committees that shall have the power and authority as conferred upon them by ordinance and by law. So the council does have the ability to create,
Council
and
itself.
that's exactly what we relied on when we created the Arts Commission. Unfortunately, I've been kind of nosy with Kansas City, Missouri, and they have a veterans board, and they have an economic development board. You know, so they have a lot of different things. Now, Raymore's not maybe quite to the complexity that we need to establish
Well,
these.
didn't
but
we used to have an economic development?
We've had an economic development team. I think that was,
Our first venture into that was by hiring an economic development
Yeah,
director.
I was on that.
For years.
But I never got called for a
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, I was on that. and it's-
I can
Ms. Schubach.
I can think of one board we might wanna have,
Okay.
and that's it, after we get to, we've got a historical society, which is, and a museum. The historical society is private, the museum ought to be owned by the city. And so that is something, but we can do that without having to go through any charter changes. And
Okay.
that's the only one that I can think of that we might have to do, is that the city might, want to create a museum committee, or something like that. But as I said, there's nothing statewide or locally that would prevent us from doing that, it's just something we need to think about.
Okay.
That I can think of, just a general review of statute. The next highest commission that would have references that would have to go back if we wanted to mirror planning and zoning because there were a significant number of state statutes that applied would be if we established a police commission. There are a number of state statutes that apply to those. But other than that, I can't think of, and besides the ones listed here, I can't think of a single one that I remember being called out in that manner.
Okay, before anybody calls the question, there is an element of discussion I wanted to have before we close this topic. If you look at the last paragraph on page 19, that this deals with the members of all boards, commissions shall be appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the majority of the council. And I want to make sure that we have that properly defined, which would then also lead into discussion, and Ms. Hubach, you had raised this in an email about whether we need term limits for board members. And is that something that we want to discuss before we shut down Article 8? The irony is P and Z meeting tonight. The irony is the chairman on planning and zoning, Mr. Faulkner, I think that 58 was 2 lanes back
He's been
when
on
he
it for
joined.
35 years, hasn't he?
It's something.
He hasn't been in the chair for that long.
But Mr. Faulkner has been a long valued member of that
Yeah,
body.
but he's an engineer and he gives so much to it.
And,
And Diane is so glad to have him in the house.
and yes, is why, he has announced that himself. But he is a very valued member there. He has been continuously renewed. But he has been on there for a long time. He is an example of somebody who's been on there a really long time. One of the thoughts with boards, commissions, and committees, philosophically, in my opinion, is these are, to me, the starting points for a lot of people to get involved in politics here in the community. And a lot of us who have served in other elected roles all look back and remember the time we were appointed to something and kind of got our feet wet, kind of digested a little bit of city operations to learn how things ran. People sit on there for 35 years. It really kind of plugs up the stream and keeps good people potentially out. At the same time, if we put term limits in, it's the same argument. You could be hustling a really good person prematurely out. Is term limits as to this section an important discussion to have?
The previous chairman was on 25 years and did a good job. This one did a good job. How do you determine whether they should be removed or not?
We, according to this, we have no criteria in the charter. And maybe we don't need any. Respectfully, if it's by the advice and consent of the council, theoretically, I know that there's 2 people here at the table that if we wanted to, every time an appointment came, or a volunteer came up, we could say, no, you have to go back through the process.
Has anybody volunteered for it before?
For what?
We have difficulty getting volunteers.
That's what I wondered.
It's hard to
In fact,
fire them.
BZA,
Yeah.
that just now met, we were hanging on by our fingernails, hoping that the alternate and 3 of the members showed up at the meeting.
For which?
BZA just now met.
Board of Zoning
Adjustment.
Adjustment. The Planning and Zoning Commission typically has a fairly quick application process. Park Board is very attractive, but we've had a few instances where we've had some vacancies for more than a couple months.
Yeah, that's correct, sir.
So, I mean, does anybody feel though that there's a concern that we should discuss term limits?
Well, if there's nobody applying for them, my gosh, we don't wanna kick them off.
Fair enough, fair enough.
I agree.
Just wanted to be thorough on this. If no one has anything else regarding this, and I seem to be the only one holding this up, we do have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor to keep it 8 as is? Passes unanimously. Moving on to Article 9.
Let's keep that in mind.
Now respectfully, Article 9 does have a staff report in the agenda. So I will turn to staff.
If I could clarify, the chair was very clear that unless we were responding to a previous item.
Got it.
That we were to keep that off the agenda for
Right on.
brevity's sake.
Right on.
And we do have a staff report for you.
We have a relatively short staff report when it comes to Article 9, and it's basically just a reminder for this commission. When you are going through this section, there are a couple of things that have come up under prior sections where we have deferred you specifically for this discussion. So there was a long discussion back when you were going through for qualifications of council members. You'll remember that, and there was a question raised with regard to redistricting and what happens if you're redistricted around for individual council members. Nominations and elections, which is Article 9, has a follow-up discussion for that for you under Section 9.4. There's also Section 9.3, which we have just gone through as a city, and one of the questions that had come up, and then Councilmember Hubach had raised the issue of when do we start receiving pay as council members? And so we wanted to kind of try and address that both there under the qualifications as well as 9.3 under the determination of election results. And what we want to be able to include there is a potential reference that it be by oath. So at the end of 9.3, you'd see a reference that says, office shall be declared elected and inducted into office by oath at that particular location. That would then address when you start to receive your pay, which would be when you take your oath of office. We recently had a council member that was in the hospital. If that council member had had to take his oath of office at the hospital, it may not have occurred at that particular night. It could have occurred at the following day when Ms. Werner went over in order to swear him in and provide him with his oath, in which case his term would have started at that point. So those are the comments that we had with regard to Article 9, and just as a follow-up, the other one with regard to redistricting, I was asked to look a little bit on this on the prior sections. There is no requirements, and I found this interesting, for your congressional candidates. The U.S. Constitution just requires that the person be a resident of the state. There's no requirement that you actually be a resident within your particular district. There is provision, and I ran into one that was out in Ocean Beach, and a comment in San Diego area, and it had a citation that said, Councilwoman Lori Zapp, currently representing District 6, lives in Bayho, and her residence has just moved to District 2 because of redistricting. The city charter states changes in redistricting lines cannot end a council member's term early, even if a representative no longer lives in the district he or she was elected in. So I provide that as further follow-up from our discussions. I think if you recall back when we were talking about council member qualifications, there was a, well, what happens if redistricting moves that council member out, and who's the judge of the qualifications at that particular point? So we give that to you for discussion points alone and context.
No, historically, in the last redistricting, we did have council members who went out of their district and were allowed to continue to the end of their term. Is that correct? Or were they removed?
No, I think.
They were removed.
They were removed. I think they had to vote again the next special elect. They do a special election to fill the role?
Jeannie?
My memory fails me. What year would that have been? In
2011.
2011?
Councilmember Adams was, Councilmember Adams
He was the one affected.
was the one affected.
Now, I remember on the Planning and Zoning Commission, Jay Holman was also affected.
Correct.
But he even the volunteers on the boards have a term. He was able to stay on the board to finish his term because the redistricting, he took the position when he was qualified. But when it ended, he could not be renewed. He could only be renewed to fit the new ward that he was in because they already had two members he was excluded. And so he was forcibly removed off planning and zoning, or not forcibly, but I mean, by disqualification.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we shouldn't have them based on the ward that they're in. Because you never know. I have had concerns with the voting in Ward 4, for instance, because I feel like that all of the people in Ward 4 should vote at either one or two places right in Ward 4. Instead, half of Ward 4 goes over there to Foxwood Springs, and we can't change it because the county clerk doesn't seem to want to act. And that bothers me. I think that they should be easy to get to, if you're gonna vote, it should be easy to get to voting in your ward. You shouldn't have half of the people in Ward 4 vote in Ward 3, and half of them vote in Ward 4.
Why aren't they
Ward
going
two.
over there into that, over there into,
The
the
church,
hall over there? There used to be that church, but it also used, they have that big hall over there in, Morning View. They
well,
have that big hall there, they could use that for us.
They could use that.
in speaking with the county clerk on this issue, he indicated to me that the polling places are basically chosen by who will allow him to use them. And that is the sole criteria. If he could get a polling place per precinct, he would love to. In fact, one of the discussions with the new Centerview facility is we have the ability to run multiple precincts right here in line of sight. And he would love the idea of moving every single precinct to one centralized spot, because it would be easier and easier for judging and for collection of ballots. But the problem is some of those wards, they won't allow him to run an election there, even if the facilities exist. For example, a lot of school districts have kicked polling places out because voters were hassling with children.
Security.
Yeah, and security.
You can't get in without
Right.
a reason to be there.
Well, according to the state statute, he has the right to force, and no one can deny them the right to do it, but
The problem is Morning View facility is a private facility, and the Constitution prevents him from forcibly doing that.
But
He
I'm
can use
thinking
public
about-
space, county facilities, but he cannot use private facilities.
well, what I'm talking about is the Baptist church, because half of Ward 4 votes in the Baptist church, the other half of Ward 4 votes in Foxwood Springs. There's no reason why they can't all vote at the Baptist church. It's big enough to handle 3 or 4.
Foxwood Springs is Ward 4?
No.
It's Ward 2.
No,
It's where they
Ward-
vote.
It's
Three,
in
is
Ward
what she
3,
said. It's
but the
three.
people in
But I would think that Morning
That's
View
where I vote.
would be all of Ward 4, and it would be more convenient for them to be right there to vote.
those are the ones that don't vote at the Baptist church. It's not Morning View. Morning View, then out in my area, we all vote there at the Baptist church. The ones that can't are the ones that live out in the northern part of 58.
Respectfully, the polling locations is not covered under this charter. That is the election authority of the county. It's not even worthy of discussion because we can't do anything about it.
Can't do anything about it.
No.
We can ask him, but if he doesn't change it, then we don't.
That is correct.
But now, may I ask, we haven't talked about term limits for council and mayor yet.
Yes, we
Is
have.
that on your list?
We talked about those in their respective articles
And we'll
prior.
hit it again when we go back through.
Yes.
No, wait a minute, I'm
These
not-
are merely elections, not the qualifications of the council or the mayor, which is what you're referring to.
I believe that's back on 3, wasn't it?
Yes, and 4.
3.2.
3 is correct.
Now, the one question I do have for staff is, there's no mention of how we do the redistricting, whether it is a committee that does that, or is that governed under Article 8, where the mayor appoints people to do the redistricting?
The Community Development Department, which is who are in charge of the census and the census information, make a series of recommendations to the city council, and the city council 2011, we actually took it to the city council 2 or 3 times in work session where they were looking at the information that city staff had given them and then drawing the lines as a whole as a council, and then voted on their final determination based on staff input.
Do we feel that that should be codified in the charter?
Yeah, but
I mean, I like the procedural aspect, community development, since we do already say here, as nearly as possible, an equal number of inhabitants. And that is, yes, Mr.
Hey,
Mayor?
real quick, are you good for Friday for the Gold Award?
I am not.
You're not?
I'm not. I've asked Kevin Barber to step in.
Okay, all right, good enough.
Okay, thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. And so the problem with this takes me back to my freshman year in college political science class when I learned what gerrymandering is. And so my fear is, while when you look at the weirdness of our city map, Mr. Burke and I possess, yes, Mr. Burke and I possess this incredibly compact and efficient square in the middle, and everybody just keeps rotating around us. It's kind of, it's a weirdly cut pie, but there is some rationale to it. And in 2011, there was a reasonable distribution of population. Community development seems to be like the committee, or the staff body that would have best access to that. But should we codify that this is a council decision and that there's a recommendation, or should it be left to implication?
You've got the reference in there. There shall be 4 city council where the boundary number is established by the council.
Okay, so do we feel that that's sufficient?
How would you replace it?
Well, okay, if I were to try to look for the loophole on that, I would say that 8 city councilmen could completely disregard staff's recommendations and just meet on their own and put it together themselves. And you're technically looking at 8 people who are putting their own house in order.
Keep reading.
I would say, sir, that staff's recommendation last time was the initial recommendation was significantly changed.
So, but the language here doesn't even, it would be at the whim of the council to accept staff even giving a recommendation.
Sure.
This basically says 8 people could call a work session topic, say, Mr. Fairborn, thank you very much for introducing this, but now we shall take the conversation. And by the way, Joe and Charlotte, what do you want? I mean,
As long as the number of inhabitants are fine,
Remains.
you can zigzag all you want, technically.
That's right.
Yeah, as long as it's 25, 25, 25, 25, roughly, percent of the population.
the dilemma there, I guess you could get some,
The council members are still in the same place.
You
Yes, sir.
actually can't zigzag because.
Well, it does, but I just meant like you could,
Why not
because
have
like in
a-
our Ward 3, you've got a little notch out that's to the east of Madison, and I bet in 4 years when we do this again, it's gonna be in a different ward than it is right now.
which was the subject of Mr. Adams.
Yeah.
And that's why Mr. Adams was adjusted. But the question becomes, believe me, I can become very devious with the word compact and contiguous. We could get pretty hairy up here, how things could look. I mean, in theory, if you did something that would be technically inappropriate, not when I say technically inappropriate, would not be widely favored by the community, that could be held against the council member upon reelection. And that would be a possible check and balance. But otherwise, this basically, we are leaving to the good faith of the council that they redistrict. Mr. Stidham.
Good question. I don't remember exactly what number it was under, but we talked about in 30 years, in 10 years being around 30,000 population. Given the fact that we're around 20 now, we've got 4 wards.
But we're not big enough to have a post office.
So we're about 5,000 a ward,
Don't distract me when I'm on a run.
Too late.
roughly 5,000 a ward.
Would we add 2,500 people to the current wards, or do you ever see a time where we would, instead of say 4 wards, have 5 wards?
No.
in here?
I don't think we would.
We excluded in the discussion the idea of expanding wards when we were talking about council members. That we kept it at 4 wards, 2 council members. That is an interesting topic. Now, I will tell you from a construction standpoint, since that little square that is directly above the word Ward 2, well, that there is some below Lucy Webb there, but that compact square, that, the only ward that will dramatically change, that has to grow as the population grows, because there's no room within it to shrink.
There's about
Every
there's
other
15
ward-
houses.
Every other ward, every other ward can deviate.
And that's
For
it.
example, Ward
That's about
1
it.
used to be north of 58 Highway and incorporate Foxwood Springs. So that kind of adjusted down, and Ward 3 came west. So you could see with the Creekmore development, with our development in Stonegate, and with the development on the northeast side, you could well, of course, on the southeast side, you could see those wards dramatically changing shape, still staying in the general region. But the only ward that is guaranteed to dramatically change would be Ward 2 with population growth. Because it has to kind of jut out somewhere.
Wards 1, 3, and 4 will grow, whereas Ward 2
Yes.
will not
You'll
grow.
pick up.
It will not grow by
Yes, so
building,
like-
it will not grow by buildings. It will have to grow in geographic space.
Its boundary will expand.
Yes.
Ward 1 and Ward 4 could have 2,500 residents within its existing boundaries. Ward 2 is the only one that cannot take on any more space.
Yes.
So, yes, Ms. Hubbard?
What I would like to see is have the judge do our, reevaluations. Instead of us doing it or having people do it that've got a vested interest, have the judges, cause when Congress has to, readjust, don't they usually go to the courts to do it? Or the courts have final say on it?
Mr. Zerk?
Congress makes its determinations. If there's a challenge to it, it is challenged to the courts. So the courts would take up an issue. For example, if the council came in and made a new district after the next decennial census, if there was a challenge that was raised either from members of the community or members of the council, they would challenge that to the circuit court, and the circuit court would make a determination as to whether or not the change comprised a compact and contiguous territory and contained a nearly equal number of people. That's for them to review as an appellate position, not necessarily from an initial determining where the wards are. They're not gonna step into that one.
Okay.
Does anybody have any discussion on that regarding 9.4? We're gonna leave that as is. And in fact, does anybody have any discussion on any section of Article 9? Mr. Wiggins?
I probably wrote this many months ago, and so maybe it doesn't apply here. I have 3 words on a Post-it note: temporary displacement issue. That maybe went all the way back to section 3. Does that mean anything to anybody?
Well, the temporary displacement issue.
And pertaining to this section, or is this just a Post-it note that I put in there for? Well, I know we discussed, back in section 3 or whatever, somebody had remodeled their house or had a house fire that probably doesn't really fall within. Doesn't really fall within this category though, right? It's just, okay, it's a misplaced
How many
Post-it.
was a council?
Well-
Just wanted to make sure before I just
If you need some
forgot
Post-its,
it.
I guess.
Yeah, I got plenty of Post-its.
To make you feel better, I see a rationale in that.
Well, I wanted to make sure that I clearly had a thought, and if it started to spin a wheel for anybody, otherwise.
9.2 did talk about disqualifying, so you're absolved. That was relevant. Do we have any issues to discuss on Article 9?
Somewhere along the line, I'd like for us to seriously discuss term limits for council and mayor.
Well, ma'am, we've spent almost a month doing that over previous periods. When we get to the end, we can revisit that. How about we do that at that point?
That's back to
Okay.
3.
So, I'm not saying we're not, but how about we get through the charter before we go back?
Before we do that.
Because we did have significant discussion on both those topics. Okay, at that point then, I'll make a motion to go ahead and keep Article 9 as is.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Moving on to Article 10. Yes.
So we are not including bio.
Oh, correct, that's right. He had the staff recommendation of change of text.
9.3 at the very end.
I will amend my motion to include staff's recommendation regarding 9.3 for the inclusion by oath, as far as inducted into office. I think it was the last sentence.
Yes, it'd be inducted into office by oath.
And I'd ask for an amended second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second with an amendment. All in favor? That passes unanimously.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Moving on to Article 10, staff report.
Very similar to the last staff report we provided on Article 9, and that is simply to refresh the commission's memory with regard to some cross-referencing. I believe there'll be a cross-reference to section 10.3B. Jeannie, I'm gonna ask for your help on that just a little bit, because I think those were some of the changes you requested. And this was based upon compliance with statute, is that what you're looking for there, Jeannie? I think that's what we had discussed.
Let me pull it up here so I can be on the same, so to speak, page with you.
What is it we're looking at now?
We're right here. Section 10, they're gonna give us a staff
Article
report.
10 was not, wasn't
But they're gonna
related
give us a
to
staff report first.
statute. There was maybe some
Well, I wanted to,
staff
We're waiting for
suggestions,
staff.
It was
discussion.
an initiative petition shall be filed with the city clerk, so we were being specific with regard to where those initiative petitions were being filed. I think that was your, I think that was your request for clarification purposes that we were looking
As
at.
well as in 10.3B.
Right. Okay. So the only locations I would refer you to here under section Article 10 would be 10.3B. And there we're talking about the second full sentences. Each signature shall be executed in ink or indelible pencil and shall be followed by their voter registration address and date is what we're looking to potentially include there. So adding additional detail with regard to that. And the idea between the voter registration is where you'd be registered to vote, as in, we've got a residence here in the city, or I've got a rental house over across the, in an alternate district that you have there. Under subparagraph D for section 10.3, there was references in each one of those subs 1, 2, and 3. An initiative petition shall be filed with the city clerk is the suggestion for inclusion.
Not a suggestion for inclusion,
Sorry.
just offering
Offering.
that up
Thank you.
as a point of clarification. None of these are necessarily staff recommendations.
Right.
They would just be cleanup language that staff isn't recommending or not recommending. We're simply saying these would be points of clarification.
And then same story with referendum and recall references to with the city clerk. That's all I've got.
You're trying to avoid that highly politically charged concern.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Technically, Mr. Westcoat can come in as private citizen, so.
Door was open.
See right there.
All right, so we have the two non-staff recommended announced changes
For
in
your
10.3.
perusal and consideration. There is one final one, I think, under 10.4 that I'll interject there, I didn't see it on that page, which is within changing 5 days to 10 business days after it is filed. That would bring it into compliance with the other sections.
2/3 of the way down.
Yes, that's correct.
And within 10 business days instead of 5?
Yes, that's the, and those are simply staff thoughts on it, and I'll let Mr. Fearborn's comments on it stand.
Okay, Jonathan, could you repeat the 10.3B changes, just so I know exactly when we get to Make a
Immediately
motion.
after the word filed in each of the three, sir?
No,
B.
form of consent.
Oh.
Sure, so the form of consent, if you look at the second sentence, it would read, each signature shall be executed in ink or indelible pencil and shall be followed by the physical address and date of the person signing.
Physical address or voter
Or
address?
voter.
Voter registration address, or is there a difference there? You said voter registration earlier, which I like, cause that's different than your physical address potentially, depending on,
I know of people that have a residence in 2 wards, and the husband votes in one ward and the wife votes in another ward.
right?
Because I asked them, why are you voting here? And they said, well, we have another house down here.
I hope Chris Kobach doesn't hear about that.
I was kind of confused at that.
Smart aleck.
I was confused at that when that happened. But I thought that was strange.
Fair
I'm sorry, yeah, you
But
want,
maybe they had not sold the other property and that was in the offing or something.
Okay.
the
As long as
first
they
time,
didn't
that-
both vote.
the first amendment language that I went through, it was,
Yeah, that's
each
cool.
signature shall be executed in ink or indelible pencil and shall be followed by their voter registration address and date. That's the
Yeah.
language you were looking for there, not the
Yeah.
physical and date.
Yeah, which I like.
Okay, before we get to the staff recommendations, I wanted to back up to section 10.1, general authority. And this breaks down really the definitions of what is more concise in later sections as far as what is an initiative, referendum, and recall. Anybody have any topics of concern with that? Ms. Hubach?
Well, I think have any of you ever carried a petition, a city petition?
Yes.
Okay, I have carried about 10 of them.
I have to,
She's good. Oh, you're here, okay. Yes,
I
ma'am.
just said is it mine?
You're okay, you're okay now,
You're okay.
you're good.
It's your floor.
What do I need to eliminate?
Oh, you're fine, you're good now, you were just really loud a moment ago.
I have carried about 10 of them, and the thing that has always bothered me on it is the percentages. And that it says it's a percentage of the entire, registered, people that are registered to vote at the last, usually at the last general election.
Okay.
That's 10.3.
And-
10.3.
Yes,
I do want to bring that was going to be a question. I'll turn to you when we get to 10.3. Any on 10.1? And I do that because I actually have an issue under item C. On the recall issue, we have in here, no elected official shall be subject to recall within 6 months after induction or the last 6 months. I actually don't like that. Because first of all, most of the time when we want to recall somebody, it's because you voted them in and somewhere in that process, something occurred that soured you on that individual, but because of the procedural step of the election, they prevailed. So to have to wait 6 months with somebody you don't want or potentially is not, they're qualified based on our charter, but they basically are not or qualified in the hearts of the voters. I don't like the idea of waiting 6 months, and I think that should be removed. I think someone should be eligible for recall at any time. Now, we talked before about the costs of elections, where the idea is you don't wanna run a special election 2 months before you have a normal one. But no offense, if somebody's really that bad, we should have the right to choose. Now, if we're 60 days before, say, the April election, I could see us just going, you know what, just wait a little bit, but let the voters decide that. But I don't like the fact that somebody could be a lame duck for 6 months and go to town on this community knowing that you can't do anything to me anyway. I think that the citizens have the right to remove their representative at any time. This should not be allowed.
have you ever done a recall? It takes a lot of time.
Yes.
What's the
It
process
takes a
on
lot of
that?
time.
I mean, time-wise.
Well, this process, I mean, just when you look at the steps that you take under the petitions themselves, a recall petition shall be signed by at least 30% of the total number of qualified voters registered to vote for that office. So you take 35%, so I'll throw myself as a
Let me get my
hypothetical.
calculator out here.
I'm very, let's say hypothetically, I'm
We
disliked.
need 1,500 signatures.
Well, hold on,
In-
not of
In,
five,
well, if
No.
there,
How many voters
if,
should
of
you
five
five,
thousand
Election.
people, but of
They're
them,
not all
they're
registered
not all
voters.
registered to
Right,
vote.
right,
If you
correct.
take, the standard is 75% of the
No, how many
population.
voted in the last election is what it is.
It's not,
it's
it's how
of
many
registered
registered
voters.
Yes, it's a
so there's
registered
10,000
voter.
registered voters, it's
I
3,000
think
people.
I thought it was how many
So
voted
there's-
in the last election?
No,
No, it's registered voters.
when you look at the
Don't lose your right to
petition,
vote in a future election if you didn't vote in the last
the
one.
qualified
That
voters
would be what you're
registered to
saying.
vote at the last register, not who voted, but who was available to vote. So you have roughly 3,800 people in Ward 2
Okay.
that you would take the 30% of.
All right.
Well, let's do all the Braymore, 'cause you're gonna do.
Well, no, you would only do the
Oh, you're
ward.
doing
If
a
you're
council.
using
So eleven-
me,
so
Ward
11
2,
You're not doing
1140.
a mayor.
you're not doing the
Still
mayor.
over
Let's
1,000.
just, for me, is that, I'll pick on me. So Ward 2, 30% of 3,800 is,
1140.
1,140 people.
Let me back.
And how,
math people,
No, he didn't, I'm just repeating it.
1,140?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you need 1,100, I mean, that's a lot of doors. Especially since the average voting in Ward
You have to
2
get them in the
per
room.
election is less than 400.
Why
So you
wouldn't,
would,
why wouldn't it be of those that cast ballots in that election? Because in part, you're giving people that didn't vote for or against the person at the time, and I'm just asking this for a knowledge, I'm not leaning either way on it, but you're allowing people to have an effect on getting someone out that didn't put him in, or vote not to put him in.
I tell you what though, because that is a really good question, that's along the lines of Ms. Hubach's question. I wanna stay big picture on the
10-1.
recall of the 6 months.
Yeah.
I accidentally used an example and we chased the example. Because that's a very good
Well,
point, we're
I
gonna
was
bring up
looking at
next.
it like, when we tried to get rid of Frank and we were doing the mayor, it took a long time to pull that off.
Yes, it can. The question though is depending on the severity of what the conduct is. I mean, you're right, the citizens may
It
turn
took
against
long,
an
and
elected
it's
official.
hard to pull that off in
It may
6
take
months.
them 2 years and they just wait, but I don't like the initial idea that you get, cause 6 months at the front, 6 months at the back of a 2-year race is 50% of their time in office.
Mm-hmm.
So why did they get the first quarter and the last quarter? I mean,
Yeah.
because if people are gonna be bad, they're either gonna be bad right in the beginning or right at the end, not in the middle. So my recommendation on 10.1C is we remove
Yeah.
both 6 months periods. If you wanna go through the hassle of the recall process and you have enough committed citizens, you can get them out.
What's the learning curve? You're talking about 6 months right up front. What's the learning curve, or the absorption
Depends on the
rate?
person.
Yeah,
Different
But-
council members, and I can only speak to my experience, different council members have different curves. A couple of us, I would argue, were pretty much up to speed within a few months. I've seen council members take almost half their first term. By a year, you've pretty much experienced everything and but like, we just have had 2 council members hop on the council within the last 14 days. The work session, both equally participated in the work session topics, equal to the other council members. Now, doesn't mean they're gonna be up to speed on everything, like the budget is completely foreign to them, but I mean,
People with-
everybody's kinda unique on their
People
own.
with previous board experience get to speed quicker because they've been involved with the city
Well, they might have been
in
watching
some
recordings
aspects.
on-
And it
Correct.
might be only on the parks issues or only on the planning and zoning issues.
My concern though is with the recall idea, I don't believe that is being precipitated because of a learning curve. I don't think somebody grows into being so bad the community turns on them. I'm seeing somebody who commits a crime, embezzles, a sex offense, something that would be so egregious that the community quickly says, this is bad.
but
I
that
mean,
not automatically
Don't they have the right to go to trial before that
disqualify.
happens? They
well,
can't,
no.
and that's gonna take
No,
more
they
than-
don't. Because
Okay.
in this, this is an elected position, so this is not a trial by a jury, it's trial by election.
Well, how do you know that
So-
they did the thing that you're alleging they did?
And that's but you see, that we don't infuse that into this. When you elect somebody,
Right.
we elect bad people and good people all the time. But if they're good at what they do and you want them, you elect them. We have, I mean, now there are qualifications as far as things, but, you know, if we have somebody that puts themselves in a position that they lose faith, I'll give you an example since I'm the one pushing this. I brought felony theft charges on a Treasurer of the Homes Association member here in the city of Raymore. And in the discussion, part of my audit finding is that just the knowledge that he did something or did something that was suspicious caused a lack of faith of the board around him. It didn't matter whether he really embezzled. Everybody had already lost faith in him. So even if he was acquitted, he was going to be useless in that position. So the recommendation was to remove him from the board. That's not a penalty, but they removed him. They didn't need a trial by jury for that. And so in this particular, it's very interesting.
Downstairs, little kid.
Oh, that's a hoot. So, but in this particular instance, does somebody do something that rises to the level that would shock the conscience of the community, where somebody would want to remove somebody through recall?
Have you made that a motion?
I threw it as a recommendation. I'm open. I was trying to bring it for discussion. I'll make it as a formal motion to remove the elements subject that within the 6 months after induction into office, nor during the last 6 months of the official's term.
I'll second it.
Basically, that whole sentence, to be honest with you.
10.1C, you're gonna remove the
The
second full sentence.
second full sentence. And we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Is there any, I don't know, I'm just wondering if there's any benefit to leaving some sort of time period at all, especially in the end. I guess that's just my biggest concern. I mean, if somebody were to quit city council, 3 weeks before, would you guys go through the process of finding somebody to appoint for that 3 weeks before the election, or do you just?
This is only.
No, I know,
for
I'm just,
recall.
I know, but I'm just trying to use something as an example, like, you guys had a recent, last year you had to fill a spot because a council member quit
Right.
in the middle of the term. So if similar situation, like, do you guys just float it for, if it's 2 months before, I don't know. I guess I'm just, from a logistical standpoint, is there any benefit to having a little bit of cushion, or is it just, it's a waste and let's not?
My rationale here was that I think the circumstances dictate. I mean, if it was something so egregious that a council member went out and committed a murder or a violent crime, then we would want, we don't care what our timeframe is.
Qualifications.
But if we run into a situation where
While they're
somebody
active.
does something that maybe, well, and this is probably a good example, makes an incendiary remark from the dais that was maybe hurtful to a cultural community, or, a historical improper reference.
Sure.
That maybe it wasn't a crime, but it was something that offended or created a loss of
Are you
faith.
talking about Sean Spicer, because we don't need to go into.
No, no, no,
Don't need to be talking about chemical weapons and
no,
stuff.
no,
here.
no, actually, my example was the mayor of Montreal,
Oh, God.
and some of the, kind
God
of
rest his
just,
soul.
yeah, he made a lot of awful
Toronto
remarks.
or whatever.
We've heard of people making just insensitive remarks,
That's a good point.
offensive, Mr. Burke.
So you're saying that that person would not even be afforded a hearing in front of city council or anything?
Well,
How do you know, I mean,
they'd have to be.
if
recalled,
someone,
first of all, though.
how would that not interfere with a person's right to trial of their peers if, say, they were, if you
But
talk
they are
about a
getting
murder,
a
you
trial.
talk about a murder, if they haven't been even charged or and then the recall comes in the middle of the beginning of their trial, how would that not affect the jury, the jury pool in the community
Well, but-
and mess up the ability to prosecute someone?
Mr. Burt, the jury, the recall process is a trial by jury. And the election is the jury verdict. This isn't you're just recalled. We have to go through the petition process, which is a vetting of the community to test whether they believe they want to explore this. And if the community says, no, it's not sufficient enough, we may not like the guy, but 30% of the registered voters go, or 70% or more say nah, then that is in essence a judgment by jury.
Do you think it should be 30%?
Well, that's a
That's
separate
next
question.
page.
But I don't like the idea that you basically get a free pass for 12 out of 24 months to arbitrarily do anything, and you can't even have a trial by jury to convict you. You're
So,
absolved
any
for
reason,
12 out of 24.
any whim at all, by 30%, the public would be enough. Any whim and any,
To put you on a ballot.
Yeah, just to put you
okay,
on a
all
ballot.
right, all right.
And yes, you can already do that 12 out of the 24 months. I think the other 12 months are arbitrary. I don't see why the circumstances should dictate, not us putting an artificial free pass zone on the front and back.
How does that get in there to begin with?
I don't know, actually. Does staff have what the historical reason for putting that in there is? Or is that just something they all do?
It's the same language as Lee Summit's language is. At this point, we anticipate it's a holdover from, because we utilize Lee Summit as part of of their model for it.
Okay. Mr. Castleman, I think you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because that is a conduct issue. I think most recalls have to do with conduct, and you're gonna get, as you say, a free pass for 6 months. You may do something very egregious, string a bunch of DUIs together. Well, you can't touch me on the city council because I'm protected for 6 months. Yeah, as it stands. And your custody or your conduct is usually clear and evident. It's not a matter of waiting for a conviction.
And I use the example of a crime. It may be an act of conduct that is not criminal in nature, so there would never be like a county prosecutor involvement, but there's still the value of the community in having faith in their elected official.
And if we're talking about 10 years down the road, the possibility of that may increase.
Yes. Yes. And with more money and more people involved, there's more risk. Mr. Fearborn.
The possibility may exist that on the front end, the reason that this is in is the commission, the ballot language that would be associated with a recall would simply be, and you all may know, there was actually a council member recalled at Lee Summit at the past municipal election. The ballot language doesn't list a reason. It just says,
Yes.
shall council member from Ward 4 name here be recalled. Boom. That's all the people see on the ballot. So unless they've done their research, they have no idea why that's on there. I might suggest that the reason for the 6 months on the front that's currently in there is if somebody gets elected and it was a really close race and a very hot, somebody could immediately file a petition to have that person recalled within the 6 months just because they didn't vote for them. And the very nature of seeing something on the ballot that says, shall so-and-so be recalled, they may not have a good reason for them to be recalled other than they didn't vote for it. And now it's on there with a very generic statement. That would take a great deal of animosity on a losing voter's part to actually put that in there.
But when you consider right now roughly only 6 to 8% of each ward votes, to get 5 to 7 times of that to show up for a recall would be a I mean, almost an honorable feat in its audacity. Cause it then makes you say, if you lost the election and challenged out of spite, why didn't you exert the same effort running for office that you did pushing for
But
the
you could get that,
recall?
you could make that, you could physically do the legwork as a losing candidate, and you could get that done in 2 months. If that's all you, I mean, you could get that done in, I mean, I'm sitting here recalling the amount of time it took to go where I went, and you would probably have to spend, you'd have to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes per person to explain the situation, or you'd need to have a letter campaign going out, but you could get it done. If you were to lose by 38 votes, you know, people lose by 7 votes and things often in local races. Anyway, I'm just
Okay.
talking about it.
I'm playing ignorant here. I believe I made that as a motion. I did not recall if there was a second.
Ms. Hubach.
Mr.
Ms.
Hubach.
Hubach.
So any further discussion on the removal? Seeing none, all in favor? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, all opposed, 3 opposed. Passes by majority, 6 to 3. Okay, moving on to,
Can I just ask a question?
please.
Now, on the election, for Ward 2, Joe's name was still on there, or Mr. Burke's name was still on there with the other man,
yes,
and the other man had dropped out.
Not
He had
officially.
dropped out. He just said, I'm not gonna actively campaign.
he was not removed from the ballot. He was
He
still
did
qualified and
not
eligible.
remove himself from the ballot.
There's a time
He
frame.
just chose not to actively,
So didn't he
Campaign.
drop out? I thought he dropped out.
Well,
He did
didn't
not
have
officially, and I wasn't gonna presume any, thing to tell him how to do that. I thought that would be totally inappropriate and rude for me to
Well,
even help
and
him
he still got
do that kind of
140
an issue.
something votes, didn't he?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
yeah, so he didn't
But-
actually drop out. He
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
suspended his activities.
However, 2 years ago, when, in Ward 3, when Kevin Barber was running, the person who originally was running against him did drop out, but at a point that the ballots and stuff were already printed,
Correct.
so her name was still listed.
Correct.
Well, she
And-
was actually still the same. She's suspended.
He told me
Because
she-
she was not legally removed from the ballot.
Right,
But
but,
what
but
he-
she
he said that-
she said, I quit.
Yes.
So she actually quit as opposed to I'm not campaigning.
So
I
would they-
believe she
would they be on the
tried
ballot
to
then? Did they
get off
change
the
it?
ballot,
No.
but it was past the date.
The last one that I
That's what I
officially saw as a true dropping out was either 4 or 5 years ago. Ryan Johnson applied and he petitioned the court to remove him and it was granted. That's dropping out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything is just, you're just saying you're not campaigning.
What is
Because
the-
as long as your name's on the ballot on election day,
Right.
you're eligible.
And had she gotten more votes than him,
Yeah.
you know, then
Right.
that's.
But
you
there,
have
there
to-
is there is a deadline for that process as
to
far
re-
as dropping
To
out.
be removed from the actual
Yeah,
ballot,
because they're already printed, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so technically, we do kind of now move to 10.3. We have the recommendations by staff in this, but taking the whole section in totality, Ms. Hubach and Mr. Stidham brought up the issues of the percentages that are covered under subsection A. So Ms. Hubach, why don't you go ahead and reintroduce your question?
Some of the other cities that I looked at had 7 and 8% for things like that. And I wondered if our percentages was too high by having 10 or up to, what is it, 10, 12?
10, 15,
On
30.
some of them, because as you pointed out, there's so many people eligible to vote, registered to vote, but they don't vote. So here you have to have 1,100 signatures on a petition, and only 400 of them voted, and would vote on it. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it should be closer together. How to do it, I'm not sure. But is 30 on the recall, do you need 30%?
It's huge.
Would 25 do? Would 30, 20 do? What about on an initiative? An initiative is when we want the city council to pass something. how many signatures do we need on that? Let's say there was something came up, I don't know what it would be, but would come up, and the communities really would like to see something done about it. And the council refuses to act, so the people want to do an initiative to make sure that it is passed. How many signatures should they have with 3,000 registered voters?
That was just 3,800 or whatever, just in that one ward. There's 15,000 registered voters probably, or
There's over 7,000 registered voters in Raymore.
probably more than that.
17,000, Ms. Eubank.
It says
It's
qual-
seven,
what is
it's
it?
roughly
They
70,
say qualified
75%.
voters. Qualified voters, not registered.
17,000 people.
And that,
Registered.
that's
Said
based
qualified.
on the general
Registered
election,
to vote.
not based on what we do.
No.
It's based on the
It's just,
general election.
it's just registered voters.
Of the last regular
be registered.
municipal
Right
election.
here.
What, now, when you register to vote, they have to go to the last list of what qualifies for that jurisdiction. And so, even though, I mean, there's other races, so for example, you don't look at the November presidential race. You were looking at the last municipal race, because that's the jurisdiction that it oversees.
Well, at one time it had to be based on the votes for governor, and they've changed that, haven't they?
What we did with our charter. I don't know the history on it. But I could see the state doing it based on governor. Well, okay, so we have a question about the percentages. Mr. Stibbe, your question was kind of along the same lines,
Well,
wasn't it?
it is, but the logistics of it would be a nightmare, trying to track down only the people that voted in that election. As I've thought through it while we're sitting here, how do you contact? I mean, you know, well, I guess you could set out with a list of addresses.
Knock
Yeah,
on the door.
Yeah,
Just like that.
Knock on the door.
yeah.
I'd say the city
It
could
would
probably
be
provide you with a
famous.
spreadsheet of everybody who voted. Their
Or the
name
county,
and
the
address,
county.
or the county, somebody could.
Election authority.
Yeah.
And although I think that is probably the fair thing to do, again, the logistical part of that, I don't,
That's why they allow up to a year sometime on these petitions, because it takes that long to get the number of signatures, find people at home. Because if it's on the weekend, they're down at the lake. If it's during the middle of the week, then they're at work, and you can make it 3 or 4 times to that same house. The first thing you have to find out is, are they a registered voter? If they're a registered voter, they can sign your petition. If they're not a registered voter, they can't.
I will say that one of my concerns is trying to question, if somebody did not vote, should they have a role or ability to participate in any of these 3 options? There are legitimate reasons why people do not vote. Either they may have been out of town for work. Sadly, I do crunch a lot of voter data regarding Raymore, and I look at election and voting behavior. Unfortunately, a part of that, you find out who votes and who doesn't. Sadly, one of my own parents did not vote for me one year. I took that very personally, reminded them around Christmas time to increase the gift, but they had a good reason, they were ill, so that was a joke, but.
We knew they didn't vote for anyone.
Well. And
They didn't vote for you, but they
Mr.
didn't
Burt
vote
takes the
against
I was
knife
gonna
and
say,
deeper.
what I did was vote against it.
But the reality is, there are times where I could almost say,
Exactly.
could we go around the table, have any of you ever missed an election? And did you miss it because you were apathetic, or did you miss it because of a conflict? And I would not actually ask you to do that, but I think that there are instances where people have had conflicts. And I would hate to say, you have to prove up your reason for not voting to see whether or not you can participate in this. One of the debates when you look at this is, should you allow the ability to do this be so low to make it happen? But if the citizens haven't really pushed for it, and they need 51% to get it to pass, should you set the bar that low? Shouldn't they earn it? Shouldn't you, through the petition or initiative, should you not make it not the whim of a limited few? It has to have a larger consensus, so you're not just a couple outliers that suddenly change the flow of the stream. Mr. Burke?
When there are, not this year, but last year, there were 4 candidates. I believe all 4 candidates, not a single one had an opponent. And so the if the bond had not been taking place, we would have a much lower turnout. And if someone that had been voted in that didn't have an opponent, it would stand to reason that it would, if it was an egregious behavior, you would certainly have a lot more interest in a recall election than you did in an election where someone ran unopposed. So to exclude all the people that said, oh, well, there's nobody else running and there's nothing else on the ballot that I really felt was important, that would exclude hundreds of people. And I would not agree with excluding any of the voters in a
Okay.
recall.
But as far as the minimum number to get something moving, you know, another thought, I hate to go political, but there, I believe it was the state of Michigan, and Governor Scott Walker, who was up for a recall. And they put him on the ballot to recall him, and a strong number of people voted to keep him. And actually, when they looked at the people that wanted to put him on the ballot, sometimes you kind of see the media, and I'm not blaming the media, but you get kind of this wave of passion, but the passion dies. And while everybody wanted him out, when it came time to vote, actually, no, they wanted to talk about putting him out. Nobody really wanted to put him out. So and how many of you have ever signed a petition and never really had the intention of voting for it if it got on the ballot? And I'll confess to that. I always, Ms. Hubach, and I'm a political science guy, so I love people playing politics. And if somebody's willing to stand out in front of a price chopper and campaign and press for an issue, God bless them. It's like motioning something forward just to have discussion. But it doesn't mean you deeply want it, but you want to give somebody a shot. So I don't think it's that hard. I don't believe it's that hard to get 10, 15, or 30%. And a recall, I like it more because as much as I want to eliminate that 6 months on the front end and back end, I still believe it should be very difficult to remove somebody, that the standard of what they did wrong is just so darn egregious that it makes sense that you should push it through. But something as small as an initiative or referendum, I believe in smaller numbers. Put that to the voters.
Legal
Mr. Burke?
question. In a petition initiative or drive, or not initiative, but in a petition situation, would a group be able to form a committee and raise funds and then pay people per signature in a petition drive? Like, I've heard that some people that go out and get petitions, like in front of the library, used to be, there was always people there, and it was reported that they were getting paid per signature. Would that be
Cass County
illegal?
Library?
Would that be a legal thing to do in a, can you pay people to go out and get petitions? I don't know the answer to that.
You're talking about paying an individual.
Pay somebody to just stand there and-
obtain the
yes.
names.
Obtain
to
the-
canvas,
yeah.
Not, hey, here's $10, sign my
Sign
petition.
Right. I mean, you pay the
Paying
person
for their
that's
work.
paying the person to go out and hold
The labor,
the actual petition forms.
And Mr. Burke, on numerous occasions in the last 10 years, I have been paid as a bookkeeper to prepare the MEC reports just for that very reason. Because a group will set up a campaign committee, not a candidate committee, to support a position.
Mhm.
And yes, they can pay people that do the procedural work to obtain.
Right.
They cannot pay for results, but they can pay per the effort.
They can pay them for the hour, not by signature, but they can pay them as a hourly worker. Okay. I didn't know about that.
Do we feel that these numbers, I don't know the rationale of the number. So to me, I would almost argue saying 10 and making it 12 to me is arbitrary as the initial 10. But conceptually, I did want to throw out to everybody, do you have a thought, or does anybody want to make a motion or discuss the percentages themselves and any rationale? do we hear any motions for any changes regarding 10.3?
Just section A or B, cause if B, then we need to discuss the staff recommendation.
Then let's go ahead and just not make a motion, but let's discuss B. Go ahead.
Personally, I think that's reasonable, and I'm fine with the language that the staff provided, short and simple. Cause
I wish
I
I could
mean,
remember
you're,
why we had these numbers.
you might be registered in Jackson County, but you're living in an apartment in Raymore, you fill out a petition, that's not valid. Cause
What-
you're not, that's not your registered voting address. So,
One of the things I
And you
remember,
have
because,
multiple homes, though.
who's the gentleman up in Kansas City? Clay Chastain.
Mr.
Always
Virginia?
pushing, yes, always pushing for an initiative regarding light rail. And one of the big issues I always pay attention to is, he goes in with his stack of signatures, and they take time going through them. If we create the qualification for voter registration address, the problem is you could run a scenario where somebody doesn't literally know where their area is. For example, I have people here that ask me, oh, Joe Runyons is my state rep. Well, wait a second, you live in Cass County. Well, they weirdly one year gerrymandered that district down into Creekmore, where there's part of north of 58 that's Runyons, part of it is not. And a lot of people, that changed where people are like, I thought it was Cleaver, now it's Runyon. I mean, people have these weird, would any of you run the risk of going, I'll sign that petition because I think that involves my zone or my ward or my area, and forgot that in between the last time you voted and now, you were gerrymandered into a different area. So maybe that would be with Chastain, there'd be provisional, there was provisional
Chastain could
counting.
move to Washington DC or somewhere over in that area too.
Well, true, he
He
did,
did,
but the
he
people
wasn't
that
voting.
signed. but
And the thing passed, and then Kansas City said, I don't know what we're gonna do because now we don't have the money to put this in.
True,
So
true.
now
so-
Kansas City's got their hands tied because people want the light rail and they don't have the money to provide it for the people.
Very true.
We have-
But when they did the Board of
It's a
Elections
problem.
has to go through each signature. And some end up getting
Well, I think
provisionally
it's a great
thrown
thing to
out.
have.
fine.
Mr. Zer, do you see that this is an issue where you could accidentally have, if there was a change depending on what the issue was, that the voters could be confused enough that half the people that used to vote, say on Moorhead's recall, got gerrymandered out and can't vote for it, and it threw the recall vote out?
The proposed change is not looking at the prospect of, hey, what voter district are you in? The proposed change is simply what address are you registered to for those purposes? There's still a check that has to be that we have to go through, that would have to be gone through by the city clerk in order to ensure that that particular address in fact fell within the parameters of whatever ward or district we were talking about.
A component of the staff discussion on this was that we have historically received voter registration addresses or seen PO boxes used. So we need to have, the petition should prove up what the canvassers are seeing on the book. If this person lives at 1215 Wilshire Boulevard, they should be signing 1215 Wilshire Boulevard, that they're even in the city to be doing this.
So there is an extra step on the signature person, but there's also the extra step of the clerk
Being
to
able to
verify as well.
County clerk.
And the same story with regard to inclusion of the date there as well, because if they were to move after, we wanna be able to have the date in there if they are registering at another location before the time the clerk makes their final determination.
Right on, Mr. Burke.
Something else that I do not know, so I'm asking if anyone knows, how many months do you have to live at an address to have it qualify as your physical address to be registered to vote?
As
Because
soon as you get your driver's license.
I have multiple relatives that have I've got a relative that has houses in Cass County, Johnson County, Kansas, Wisconsin, and in Florida. And I'm like, man, that'd be nice.
I
But-
have a friend of mine in Missouri who went to work at 8 AM, and the girl that he met on Friday night and just enjoyed time together with over the weekend, by the time on Monday that she left and came back, she had moved all her belongings in, and the court determined she changed her address and established residency instantly. By changing, when she went to the post office and changed her address. Once she put down, she put her name on the water bill. Once you do that, you are establishing residency. There is no waiting period.
But you're also not registered to vote at that address.
Not
When
until
you
fill
go
out the
to,
paperwork.
when you go to the Belton DMV and you get your driver's license, they say,
Right.
do you wanna register to vote? And you put it on paper, that's when you're registered to vote.
Yep.
You can move all you want into somebody's apartment and put your name on a water bill, you're not registered to vote there.
Right. If you go to the Board of Election though,
Right.
you hand in your card, they stamp that immediately, you are
But
registered to
until,
vote
but until
there.
then, you're registered wherever you were previously registered.
But you could change that in, there is no waiting period after you file that change.
I was just curious. 'cause
I think
don't know how
we've
it works.
strayed from the point.
We have.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, I'm doing.
Fair enough.
I'm just
No,
trying to
fair
understand the
enough.
process before I can make a determination.
Okay, so on dealing with B and the voter registration address, that was one of staff's recommendations. Do we have any other changes to B?
And date.
Yeah.
And-
Their voter registration address and date.
Oh, yes,
And
sorry,
date.
and date.
Be all part of the same motion.
And those would be
Right.
the only staff recommendations for B, sir.
For B.
Right.
Anything else regarding B outside of staff recommendations? If not, anything on C? We have staff recommendations on D,
These were actually the ones that I got parsed off.
non-staff recommendation.
Non-staff
but
Clarification,
mentioned
things to
D.
consider that are not
Sir,
recommendations.
we're that conversation at the
The
staff level.
the highly controversial adding the word "with the city clerk," which I imagine there were blows, somebody came to blows.
Actually, she's the one who said it's not exactly a recommendation, it's just. one of
Discussion
those-
point.
Discussion point.
Fair enough.
Well, my discussion is I like it.
I
think
do
it's
too.
clear, it
And
clarifies things,
Unnecessary.
anybody
You don't
opposed to
have
that.
to do the work.
Go, Jamie.
Yeah, 5 years from now, somebody can't, what they meant was.
Yes, well, and we've seen some instances where, like the Missouri Ethics Commission changed the rules to effective January 1st, that you can no longer go down and file in paper a committee. You must electronically file and go through Jefferson City for committees now. And that affected, so there have been changes like that. In this particular instance, it does clarify the home site where it gets filed. Okay, so Mr. Wiggins endorses that. And so any other
Because
discussion?
you needed that.
We needed that. Because he endorses it, not staff. Boy, my T's have busted over that. Okay, any other topics regarding D for discussion? Okay, so to clean up all of 10.3, we have two changes on B and D that were initiated in some capacity by staff.
That is correct.
And endorsed by members of this commission. I'll make a motion that we adopt them.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. 10.4, we have on subsection A, on procedure after filing, we do have the change, 6 sentences up from the bottom, the 5 business days to 10. Any other change regarding A? Any on B? I'll make a motion to adopt staff's recommended change on subsection 10.4, sub A.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. 10.5. At this point, I would actually go so far as to just say, does anybody have any issue regarding 10.5.6 or 10.7?
If there's anything we can do about those.
Yeah, that's probably an RSMO too.
Okay, if seeing none,
That's funny.
I'll make a motion that we keep those as is.
Second?
Motion second, all in favor? Passes unanimously. We have amazingly caught up, some speed. And I appreciate that staff included subsection D under our agenda, 5D. So technically, we can keep going ad nauseum if we wish. Does anybody wish to discuss initiate Article 11?
I move we accept it as is.
Okay, Ms. Hubach, I would actually, well, no, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I don't remember what's in it.
Well, Ms. Hubach, I will say before a second, I'll take liberty to offer, since you have discussed the issues of the debt service levy and the park service levy, that's covered under this section. You may wish to talk about that. Do you wish to recall your motion?
I'm recalling.
Fair enough. Okay, the motion is recalled. You're a good, Ms. Hubach, you're a good kid. Okay, do we wish to get into this, or do we wish to go ahead and move
Let's
on?
move on.
The reason being is because the next three articles with a little bit of discussion in subsection 14, we should be able to finish the rest of this charter in one meeting. We do not need to go later this evening.
Is there any reason why we can't accept, section 11 as is, and also come on over to sale of, granting of franchises?
I will give a reason for myself that since it was not on the agenda, I did not review these since many months ago.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is there anything about them that you didn't like, that you wanted?
I cannot remember,
Yeah.
Oh,
because it was 5-6 months ago.
well,
And Ms. Hubach,
It was in
respectfully,
September or October.
I would say, I have a couple of questions I'd like to discuss regarding actions on the budget, the tax rates themselves, and specifically 11.6 on public records. So there are a few, not a large discussion, but there are some things here. My fear is we could be here another hour, and I am willing to go longer. We discussed the willingness to go longer, but we clearly have expedited some time tonight. I think if we got together, organized our thoughts on 3 quick sections, we could burn through them in the next meeting and then go to our conclusion. We are, and to remind the group that we have on section 6, a reminder, we have regularly scheduled meeting dates 8 prior to presentation to the city, so we have several meetings left. We're
To review and.
yes, we're not crunched on time.
So the next one we have is May 2nd.
May 2nd. I'll go ahead and move past Article 5 and 6, move to public comments. Does the public have a comment?
I do have a comment.
Uh-oh.
Ryan Lester,
You're-
809 Furlong Drive.
Yes, thank you for your name and address, and you are limited to 5 minutes.
That's fine. I just want to say that I'm extremely disappointed that this committee decided that they would remove the 6-month recall provision out of the charter. I think that you should have given more credibility to what staff said, because I think the reason why it was put in, and there's 2 very specific reasons why it was added to the charter. Number 1 was so that during a very contentious election, that there would be a cooling off period before people could go out and initiate a recall procedure and elicit people who did not vote to negate the ones that did. So by taking that provision out, now you've allowed somebody who is motivated by the result of the election to manipulate the election by initiating a recall provision, because the passions will still be inflamed. Had the 6-month provision be left in, it would have cooled that off to where now people, and they're 6 months out, they're not as emboldened by what went on. The reason why the 6-month provision was left in at the back end was so that it did not force the city to have to initiate another election. Because if you look at the time period, we do April elections. Well, 6 months previous to that, we put it in October. Well, the challenge with it is the only election between October and April is the November election. Well, in order to get something on the ballot, you have to have that language in by August. Well, now by you guys taking that provision out, now you're going to potentially force the city to have a special election between November and April. And I remind you that there's 8 members of the council. So if you have one member that is acting out, the other 7 can deal with that person. If you wanted to put something in the charter to deal with somebody who has, you know, a felony charge or whatever, you do it through a code of conduct, to where you change the eligibility of the people serving, and you could have dealt with it that way. To take this provision out, you allow people to meddle with the election, and I think it's a mistake.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
That's
moved.
moved.
All right, we have a motion, I'll take, since 2 people did that, I'll take that as a motion in a second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.